Hello everybody and welcome to Bite Size Biology, and today we are looking at food. Food is perhaps one of the most continuous chapters to come up in exam papers. Pretty much every year it comes up in either question 1 or question 2. I actually cannot think of a year that has not come up in. So it's definitely a chapter you do need to know. You would know some of it from junior cycle anyhow, but there is extra detail in this chapter since then. So the main questions: to be able to describe carbohydrates, and that means the monosaccharides, the polysaccharides, disaccharides, the lipids, and the components of a lipid, proteins, and their chemical compositions, meaning what elements are they made out of. You are to be able to state examples of both catabolic, and that should be anabolic there, reactions, and you are to be able to link it to the cell structure chapter, food. So it comes up quite often in cell structure chapter, such as phospholipids, and you've also got like of keratin and so forth. And what else? To state a reason for trace elements and to give examples of different ones. State the functions for both food and water. To be able to contrast a water and a fat-soluble vitamin. To be able to name some minerals and their functions for both plants and animals. And I advise you guys to learn off two minerals for plants and 2 for animals. And finally, the food tests, which you should be familiar with from junior cycle. So let's start off. Give one example of a trace element in the human diet. Iron is the easiest one to go to. Iron, copper, zinc, one of those. Name the 3 chemical elements found in all lipids. So carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Exact same as likes of carbohydrates, except you have a different ratio. Name the basic unit that makes up lipids. So lipids are composed of 3 fatty acids and glycerol. Respiration is an example of a metabolic pathway. What type of metabolic pathway is in question? Respiration is catabolic. You are breaking down something large, such as glucose, into something smaller, such as carbon dioxide and water vapor. What is meant by the term polysaccharide? Polysaccharide is simply many monosaccharides. And finally, name a storage polysaccharide found in animals. There's only one that we really discuss, and that's glycogen. It is found in the liver. 2019. State 2 main reasons why food is required by all living organisms. So this question's been asked a few times now. So you need food for energy, you need food for growth and repair of tissue. What is the ratio of hydrogen atoms to oxygen atoms in a carbohydrate? So that's 2:1, always. So there will always be twice as many hydrogen atoms as there is oxygen atoms. Give a structural role of lipids in cells. Be careful with this one. This one caught a lot of students out. A lot of students said for a structural role there, they said insulation, and they would have got no marks. The reason being is, for this question, they specifically referred to cells. In previous questions, they just asked name a structural role. So if it's asking for a structural role in a cell, it has to be a cell membrane. If it doesn't specify the cell, you can say insulation or you can say cell membrane. Give a metabolic role of lipids in cells. A lot of students got caught in that one too, but it's the same thing as carbohydrates, to provide energy. Give an example of a fat-soluble vitamin. Well, you've only got 2 vitamins to learn off, vitamin C and vitamin D. I always think of vitamin C being SEA, so being water, so therefore water soluble, and therefore vitamin D is fat soluble. And in this order there is rickets. 2018. Give 2 main reasons why we require food. So we've seen that question before, and the reason it was asked again was because it was so poorly answered. It is energy, growth, and repair. Growth and repair are considered to be the same point, by the way. So I don't want you to see writing down growth and repair as 1 and 2. Energy always goes in there, no matter what. What is a polysaccharide? Many monosaccharides connected. That's actually a better answer, a more appropriate answer than just saying many monosaccharides, because you're not saying that they're all connected, even though it's kind of obvious. But remember, you must treat the examiner as if he or she correcting it doesn't know anything about biology. So really spell it out for them. So really you should use the word connected. Name the main structural polysaccharide in plants. Cellulose is the main one, and that's found in cell walls. You didn't have to say where it was found, but it has been asked before in the cell structure chapter, so I just put it in. Describe the composition of a triglyceride molecule, 3 fatty acids, glycerol. Give a structural role of lipids in the human body. Now, do you see here it says the human body and not specifically cells, so therefore you could say the cell membranes or you could say insulation. And finally, name a test or give the chemicals used to demonstrate the presence of protein. Now, the Biuret test is what we would say, and if you don't want to do that and you want to write down the chemicals, you must refer to both chemicals. So that's sodium hydroxide, which is your base, and your copper sulfate. And the copper sulfate is why the colour is blue initially, and it'll go violet if protein is present. 2017, so you can see it comes up every single year. Name a protein that has a fibrous structure. Keratin, where is it found? Hair and nails. That's a standard question. Give a role of a named mineral other than calcium, which is required by plants. So to be careful with this, okay, because like I said, you should know at least 2, and you weren't allowed to use calcium this time, so you had to use magnesium. Magnesium is the mineral. It is used in chlorophyll. It is found in chlorophyll to help with photosynthesis. Now, state a reason, 2 reasons for why water is required by living organisms. Again, it's the same question that's been asked time and time again. So it's a solvent and it's used for transport. And you can say minerals, you can say, it doesn't matter what you say for transport really, as long as you use the word transport as a solvent. There's more than that just for water, but they're the 2 easy ones to remember off by heart. Named a metallic element present in hemoglobin, so that's your iron, and that helps, with, has an affinity for oxygen, so it helps transport oxygen. And finally for F, which type of food biomolecule may be identified by using the Benedict's or Feeling solution, so that's your reducing sugar. Okay, 2016. We're halfway there. So, identify a non-metallic element other than carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, or nitrogen, commonly found in proteins. Sulfur. You learn it off. Give a metabolic role of proteins in the human body. Enzymes usually always comes down to enzymes. All enzymes are proteins, made up from proteins. Give a structural role of proteins in the human body. We've seen that already. So that's keratin. So we now have a metabolic role and we have a structural role. Okay. 2 different biomolecular components of a lipid. So that's again fatty acids and your glycogen. That's glycogen. That should be glycerol there. Someone just spelled it wrong. Where would you expect to find phospholipids in human cells? So the cell membrane. Again, that question was poorly answered. You see a lot of students writing down insulation, or you see them writing down different parts of the body or whatever, but it specifically referred to human cells. So it has to be a part of it. So cell membrane. Give a role of a named mineral other than iron, which is required by the human body. So I was saying before, you need to know at least 2. Generally for plants, I learn off magnesium and calcium, and for animals, calcium and iron. Calcium, same function really as plants, is to strengthen. Now for plants, it strengthens the cell wall. For humans, it strengthens bones and teeth. G was a bit of a controversial question when it came up. What is the approximate percentage of water by mass in a human cell? Now this can actually vary hugely. So if you look at mark schemes, they will accept a wide range of answers here, but I just say 70%. Okay, moving on. And I have 2 questions here marked because they were also slightly controversial in terms of, maybe not controversial, but students just didn't read the question properly. So typically, by the way, I don't know if you noticed this, but food questions, you answer 5 out of the following parts, so 5 out of the 6, but most students will answer all 5, or all 6 I should say. So A, what name is given to the simplest units of carbohydrates? So that's your monosaccharide, fair enough. Name a catabolic process that produces these simplest units. Lots of students wrote down respiration. Respiration doesn't produce monosaccharides. In fact, respiration helps to break down monosaccharides. It is digestion that helps to produce these simplest units. There are 2 catabolic processes that you need to know. Digestion and respiration. The general formula of carbohydrates is CxH2O brackets Y. What is the most common value of Y in carbohydrates? Used for energy by the human cells. So glucose is the most one, and that's C6H12O6. So therefore Y has to be 2. And for that matter, Y is not 2. I don't know why I have 2 there. Y is 6. And for that matter, X is also 6. Name a structural polysaccharide found in plants. Cellulose, and again, they were looking for the word structural. If you had wrote down likes of starch, that wouldn't have got you the marks, because starch, although it is a polysaccharide, it's not a structural polysaccharide. Name a polysaccharide other than the one referred to above that's commonly found in plants, so that's your starch. Finally, what carbohydrate is always found in DNA, so that's your deoxyribose. If you haven't done the DNA and RNA chapter yet, you wouldn't have known that. 2014, question 2. The following biochemical reactions took place in some living cells. Is this an example of anabolic or catabolic? Well, A must have been a large molecule that's been broken down into 3 smaller molecules, so therefore that reaction is catabolic. Identify X and Y. X has to be lipase, a catalyst, okay, because it's breaking down fat into fatty acids and glycerol. How does a phospholipid differ from a fat? Well, a phospholipid contains 2 fatty acids, a phosphate, and a glycerol, whereas a fat that's a triglyceride, consists of 3 fatty acids and glycerol. Name a fat-soluble vitamin, vitamin D, a disorder, rickets, you've seen that before, 2 functions and minerals. Now, you didn't actually have to specify what the minerals were, but like calcium strengthens bones and teeth, iron has an affinity for oxygen. And that's the ones I wrote down. But you actually didn't need to mention the minerals at all, which was a bit unusual. 2013. I really like this question because you had to really think about it for all of these, and it brings in multiple chapters too. So starch and glucose, well, starch is a polysaccharide, glucose is a monosaccharide, amino acids and proteins. Well, proteins are made out of amino acids linked together, and therefore amino acids must be the building blocks for a protein. Cellulose and keratin. Well, cellulose is a carbohydrate and keratin is a protein. I specified that it was a structural polysaccharide, but you could have said a carbohydrate. Enzymes and hormones. Enzymes just state what they are. They're biological catalysts. Hormones are chemical messengers. Both are actually very much protein based. The Biuret test and the Feelings or Benedict's test. So you just say what they're testing for. So the Biuret test is testing for proteins, whereas the Benedict's test is testing for reducing sugar. Fats and oils. Fats are solid at room temperature. Oils are liquid at room temperature. You must use the word room temperature. If you leave out room temperature there, you do not get the marks. Okay, so fats and oils, you must refer to room temperature. 2012, name a monosaccharide, so that's your glucose. You could say fructose too. It's probably more than that, but I suppose glucose is the more common one. Give the formula of a monosaccharide referred to, so that's the one that you would have learnt off. So that's C6H12O6. That's the formula for glucose. It's not the general formula for carbohydrates. The general formula for carbohydrates is CX bracket H2O bracket Y. That's the general formula. A polysaccharide that you can get there is starch. So you get lots of glucose molecules joining together and you make starch. Give one way in which amino acids differs from a monosaccharide in respect to chemical composition. So whenever it goes back to chemical composition, think of the elements. And the easiest way to refer to it is amino acids. They're essentially going to make up proteins, and they contain nitrogen, whereas carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. Whereas polysaccharides, in this case monosaccharides, it doesn't matter. Monosaccharides contain only carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. In other words, no nitrogen. Moving on. What do carbohydrates and fats have in common in respect to chemical composition? Well, they have 3 things in common: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. The difference between the 2 of them is the ratios of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. And how may one fat differ from another in terms of chemical composition? Well, for a triglyceride, you have 3 fatty acids, tri meaning 3, and a glycerol. But for a phospholipid, you have a phosphate replacing a fatty acid. In other words, you have 2 fatty acids, a phosphate, and a glycerol. So how does it differ? A phosphate replaces a fatty acid. That's it. Okay, second last question. Answer 5 of the following, but again, you do all 6 just to be sure. What test might be used? What type of food might be found out by using brown paper? So that's testing for fats, lipids, it's fine. Give one role of a named mineral in plants. So I said calcium, and it strengthens cell walls. You could have referred to magnesium, helps with photosynthesis. What colour indicates a strong positive result for Benedict's test for reducing sugar? Brick red colour. Give a role of lipids in cells. Well, they didn't specify whether it was a metabolic role, which would be energy, or a structural role, which would be cell membranes, so you could have said either. Give a role of water in the human body, other than as a component of cytoplasm and body fluids. I just said it was a solvent. How many common amino acids are found in proteins? So there's about 20. Finally, in relation to human diet, what is meant by a trace element? A trace element is something that's found in tiny amounts. Okay, it's something that's only required by the body in tiny amounts. I use the word tiny. Okay, I don't want to see students writing down in small amounts, because trace is actually smaller than that, really. Give an example of it. So iron, copper, zinc. Iron being the common one that I use. State one way in which an oil differs from a fat. Well, an oil is liquid at room temperature. Vitamins divide up into 2 groups. So you've got fat soluble and you've got water soluble. You didn't have to name the vitamins. I did, however, just to provide a little bit more information for you guys. What is a triglyceride? That's simply 3 fatty acids and glycerol. And give example of a catabolic reaction in a cell. Now, if it's referring to in a cell, digestion is no good. In the body, yeah, fair enough, digestion. But if it refers to in a cell, has to be respiration. A lot of students would have got caught out on that one. Okay, so just going back up to the top there, you can see actually all the main questions were asked multiple times. It's a very common chapter to come up, and it's definitely a chapter that all students should be attempting to get full marks in.